All right, so in this tutorial, what I'm going to do is cover some very basic wall commands or wall editing commands, which we also will call drawing commands. And then we'll also discuss temporary dimensions. And these are kind of the last couple of things that we need to really kind of hone in and understand before we go off and start modeling an actual building or working off of on creating a floor plan. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to new. I'm going to open up a residential template file. I'm going to hit OK. All right. So we have Revit open. And up in the architecture tab, we're going to go ahead and get started by creating a wall. Okay. And let's just change this to, let's stick to an exterior. You know, we've been using the wood siding and wood stud, so let's go ahead and use that. And for this sake, let's just go finish face. It doesn't matter, interior. Okay. Now, if you haven't gone check out the other tutorials where I really kind of go in deeper to talk about the walls themselves, location line, base constraints, and top constraints. Okay, so what I'm going to do is what you may have noticed actually is when we click on wall and we get the properties box, you may have also noticed that the ribbon window has changed. Okay, you'll notice that the commands here are in a new tab that popped up that says modify place well. So let me hit escape, go back to the original, and you'll notice that that one tab is not there. Actually, we do have a modify tab, which has most of the same similar commands. Okay, but once we click on wall, you'll notice that it automatically goes to a manage place wall ribbon window. And in addition to that, we have what we call the options bar right below here. Now, a lot of the questions or a lot of the information in the option bar is also found in the property box. Okay, with the exception, and I'm not sure why, but there's always one or two buttons that the option bar has that does it. So for example, the height, right? Having it unconnected 20 feet is also right here, unconnected 20 feet. Location line is also right here. So it's just multiple places where you could find the information. However, the one button that does not exist in the properties box is chain. Now, when I go off and I create a wall and start creating walls, you notice how it automatically wants is set up to continue going and creating more and more walls. That is the chain command. So if I deselect chain, what will end up happening is that once I click, it stops, right? It no longer wants to continue. So if I want to create a new wall, it goes there, and that's it, okay? This is a preference. Some people prefer having chain turned off because oftentimes if I want to enter a wall or dimension, I would enter, say, 10 feet, okay? And that's it. And then I would say, let me zoom in now. Let me go ahead and click on the next one, and let's go 5 feet, right? And so people prefer not having that chain. I prefer it on, but it's a preference. And so play around with it. I think, you know, I've talked about it in the past that with these softwares, it's about efficiency and it's about what makes you the most comfortable and the most efficient. And so you have to really kind of play around with the software to figure out, hey, I like this setting, or no, you know what, I don't like this setting. It doesn't work for me, okay? So, going on here. Okay, sorry about that. So what I wanted to explore a little bit is these modified drawing commands. Okay. Now there are, I don't know, about 10 to 12 drawing commands here. Okay. We're only going to cover about half of them. The ones that I think are the most common and more commonly used when creating our walls. So the first one is the trim extents button. The trim extent button is this button right here. And this is probably the most commonly used command because it does two really, really great things. So I'm going to just draw a wall. I have chain, yes, I have chain turned on here. I'll hit the escape key and I'll create another wall over here. Okay. So let's say I want to create or if I want to join two walls, Well, I can select the wall, I could hit the trim extents, and then I could click on these two walls and join them. It's that easy. The other thing that we could do, so it's trim and extents. So it's kind of a 2-in-1. So this actually has two functions. So we just saw how we can connect two walls together. But we could also, really quickly, we'll talk about these buttons, the blue dots here, the grip points. But really quickly, I just kind of select it and click and drag on that blue dot. Okay, we'll talk about that when we discuss the temporary dimensions. But what it also does is it'll trim some walls. So I can select on this portion of the wall and this wall, and it'll trim that excess piece of wall. Now the trick with the trim, okay, if we're going to use this command for trimming, is that you have to click on the portion of the wall that you want to keep. So in other words, let's say the last time I kept this corner, right, or this side of the wall and this one here. This time, let's keep this side, and we're going to do that by clicking on this side, right, from this intersecting wall. We'll click on this side, and then we'll go ahead and click on this bottom one, and that's going to keep those two. Okay, let's undo that. It doesn't matter which one you click first, so I could go ahead and click on this one first. And if I want to keep this side, then I would click on this side. Okay, so it doesn't, the order in which you click doesn't matter, but what does matter is that you are clicking on the correct side or on the side that you want to keep. Okay, so that trim extents is going to come in really, really handy. Let's just go ahead and cancel this. Yeah, it's going to come in really handy as we're kind of moving along. And as we start building floor plans, you'll get to see it in action of how kind of practical and how useful this one command is. So again, we could also use it to extend. Okay. The next one is that's really helpful is going to be the align tool. So let's go back. Let's create another wall. So these are all exterior walls, right? So let's say I have a jog on the exterior wall here. And let's go and just connect it. So let's say we have our building, okay? And now I want to do an interior wall. So let's go ahead and click over here, and I'm going to come down to an interior 4 3/4 partition. Okay. And let's say I want this wall to align to this wall. Well, I could try to run that dimension, right? I could try to figure out what that length is. I could look at the floor plan, and I can begin to draw and do offsets and things like that. Or what I can do, let's just set our location line. We'll set this to finish face interior. It could be exterior or interior. And for the sake of what we're doing right now, it's kind of irrelevant. I could have chosen center wall, for example. So with the align tool, I'm just going to draw this wall just right there. And you can say, well, that's really off up here if you said that you wanted it to align here. Well, the great thing is that we could use the align tool. So that's this command right up here. And on the right-hand side, and sometimes it'll also pop up in the options bar as well, right? And this really varies on the resolution of your screen, how big of a screen you're working on. So sometimes you will see it pop up in here. But we want to go to these options. And right here where it says prefer, what we want to do is set it to wall faces. So mine was already set to wall faces, but yours by default, I think, is set to wall center lines. So we're going to go ahead and click on wall faces, make sure that changes. And then we're going to do, okay. So Revit, for the longest time, I was really hoping that in this 2024 version, they would have resolved this issue, but I don't understand why this issue doesn't get resolved. I've looked on a bunch of blogs. Everyone runs through the same problem. The very first time you set your preference to wall faces and you move down here, notice how it's not set to wall faces? It's still giving me the default center line, okay? So I can't actually select the wall face. So what we do, even though it's saying to select the wall faces, what we do is we'll go ahead and set it to wall faces and then hit the escape key twice, okay, to completely get out of the wall commands. We'll go back to architecture and we can go ahead and create another wall. right? Actually, no, I take that back. We'll go ahead and select one of these. And then we'll go ahead and use the align command. Okay. Now it is set to all faces. Now let's cross our fingers and hope this worked. No, it did not work. Okay, let's take a look into these settings. Okay, let's take a look. I wonder if it has to do with our thin lines. So let's go ahead and click, make sure our thin lines is selected. And maybe this worked out for you and it's just not working out for me. And that seems to have done it. Okay. The other thing, if that didn't, that's interesting. I wonder why that happened. Let's also change, I'm just realizing that since we opened that new file, we don't have the detail levels are set. And since we're at it, sorry, I should have started with this. Let's go ahead and change our settings to shaded so we can get those colors in. Makes it a lot easier for us to understand what is what, okay? All right, so we're gonna click on, so our align tool is set to wall faces. I'll go ahead and now select and say I wanted that wall to align to this line, which is the face of the drywall. Should line up with this face of the drywall. Okay, and there you have it. Now the trick to the align tool, obviously besides getting the wall faces and the settings correct, let me undo this move. The trick is, let's go to align, that the first click is what you want to align to, and the second click is what you want to move, okay? So when we just did it, we clicked here first, and we said, okay, we want to align to this point, to that line right there, and we want this to move, and we want this part there to move and align to our align line. But if we change that order, and we said, let's go back to align, and we said, I want to align to this face, and I want this to move, then that will end up moving. Okay, so again, your first click is what do you want to align to? The second click is what do you want to actually move, okay? So these two, the trim extents and the lines, are really common tools that help you model a lot faster, because if we automatically know, hey, this needs to be aligned to this wall there, it's a lot easier to just draw something and align it than it is to go to the floor plan, check to see if there's dimensions. If there aren't any dimensions, then you have to do the math and you have to kind of go around different kind of ways of finding the actual distance or the actual dimension. Okay. Now, the one thing I forgot to mention when talking about these tools, and really talking about any of the commands in the ribbon window, is if we leave our cursor over the command, we talked about the help, right? That little video that pops up. But if we look at the actual name of the command, it says align, and then it says AL. And so AL is the shortcut key on the keyboard. And these shortcut keys are really, really good to memorize, okay? Because again, we've talked about being efficient with this software. It's important for you to be fast, and it's important for you to be efficient. And so the more time you have to come up here and look for the command, or you go hunting for it, as opposed to memorizing the command shortcut, it'll save you seconds, but it actually does more than that. First of all, seconds adds up to minutes, and over time, throughout the day, and as you're modeling, those minutes add up, okay? But most importantly, what it does is it disrupts your workflow. And so as I'm modeling and as I'm drawing and as I'm going through the floor plan, okay, my eye and my mind are on the floor plan and thinking about what it is I have to do. If I have to stop that to come up here and go to the architecture tab, well, no, now I have to go to the modify tab and then to the modify panel, and align is right there, right? If I have to stop what I'm doing so that I could focus on where this command and locating the command is, it disrupts your workflow. And then I have to go back and kind of reprogram my mind and change and shift to, oh, now I got to look at a floor plan. And now I got to look at dimensions. Where was I again? right? So you really want to, it's very convenient, very important for you to memorize these shortcuts, okay? Now, if you're familiar with AutoCAD, AutoCAD is very similar because it is command-based, but the one big difference is that in Revit, we don't have to hit enter or spacebar at the end of it, okay? So Revit has streamlined the shortcut key. So all I'm literally doing is hitting the letter A-R, sorry, A-L, and that's it. No spacebar, no enter. Just type in A-L, and then you can go ahead and align, use the align tool. If I hit TR, that's my trim extents command. Okay, so if I wanted to trim that off, I can go ahead and do that. And I can select this and delete it. Okay, so as we're kind of moving along, it's really important, and as you're practicing with these commands, it's really important to take a minute and just memorize these shortcut keys, okay? I promise you it's gonna make you a faster and better at the software, okay? All right, so next up are the three basic tools. That's move, copy, and rotate. So if I wanted to take this, okay, and it really isn't this wall, and this is going to apply more as we begin to install individual objects, like cabinets or tables, kind of standalone pieces. Then we're going to use the move tool, okay, and that's going to be MV. Now, there's different ways. I probably wouldn't use the move tool to move a wall. We would use the temporary dimensions, okay? But since I don't have a standalone object, we'll just go ahead and select the wall, and then hit the space bar, and then it asks me where to grab the object or grab the wall, and then I'll just go ahead and move it down. Okay, but let's explore the move tool a little bit later on when we have the when we have standalone objects. It is good and it is important to understand where the move tool is, and it is right under here in your modified panels, but we'll discuss this a little bit more in the future. The next one is going to be, let's actually copy. So the next one is going to be copy, so that's CO. And now what I'm going to do is select the objects. Let's go ahead and add a couple more walls in here. Let's go architecture. The same thing, just so you know, when I place my cursor on the wall command, you see it says wall WA. So if I wanted to just jump straight into building a wall, I would type in WA on the keyboard, and I'm ready to go, right? I'm just going to draw a few more of these walls. Let's just go one more like that, just to help us understand the copy tool a little bit more. So let's go over here to the modify panel. And we actually, if I had memorized, or if I've memorized the copy command, I can actually be in the middle of the wall command and jump straight to the copy command, the letter CO. You notice that the cursor changed. So let me do that again. Take a close look at my cursor. Right now, I'm in the wall command and Revit is ready to build a wall. I'm going to type CO, and you notice that my cursor automatically changed and shift to the command for copy. So you begin to notice how fast that transition is, as opposed to me stopping, hitting the escape key twice, coming to the modify, and doing looking for the copy command. So can't stress it enough. Memorize the shortcut commands for the commands that you begin to realize that you're using more and more. Okay. So the first step to the copy is I'm going to select all of the objects I want to copy. So I'll click here. Sorry, hold down the control key. When we talked about the control and the shift key, look at the cursor. Right now, the shift key is the minus, the control key is the plus, so that's going to allow me to select multiple objects. If I hold down the shift key, that's to deselect objects. Once I'm done, I'll hit the space bar, or I could hit enter. And then it's essentially the same as a move command. So I could take this up, move my cursor up, and let's say we want to move this up 10 feet. 10, enter. Sorry, we're not moving, we're copying. And there we go. And then I hit the escape key to exit that command. Okay. And the next up is going to be the rotate tool. So the rotate tool by default is set to rotate an object at the center of that object. So if I zoom on in, you'll notice that the dot here, this grip point, is at the center of this wall. So I can click and then rotate this wall. And I can even type in the angle that I want. So let's say we want to go 45 degrees. I would type in 45, enter, and there we go. Okay. Let me undo that. However, if we wanted to change it so that it's not rotating at the center of the wall, because let's say we want to rotate it, I don't know, 15 degrees, but from this point here, then what I would do is change this where it says center of rotation. We could click place. And so now it's going to ask me, well, where do you want the center of the rotation to be? And so now I'm going to go ahead and say right here at this point where the drywall, where the two gypsum board meet, that's going to be my center. And then you'll notice that now the rotation line has shifted or has moved to that place where we clicked. The other thing that it's going to ask is, do we want to disjoin the wall? So right now, these two walls by default are connected. They're joined together. Do we want to disjoin them when we rotate? That's up to you. It depends on what it is you're rotating. Do you want to create a copy? So let's go ahead and click on copy and say we do want to create a copy. So let's go ahead and click once. And again, this is not a click and drag. It's click to start. We're going to move this out and let's go 30 degrees. So let's go 30, enter, then hit the escape key to exit. So what it did is it rotated the wall and it created the copy. So it copied this wall and rotated it. So this way we didn't have to do multiple things. We didn't have to copy it once, have two walls on top of one another and then rotate one of them. It did both of those in the same command. So that's what's really great about the rotate tool. Okay. And then the last command that I'm going to cover is going to just be the split object, or the split element, sorry, SL. Okay. This is really helpful if, let's say we wanted to create an opening. Let's say this wall went all the way to the other side, okay, of the building. But we wanted to create an opening here. Well, I could select the wall and then come over here where it says split element, or I could use the shortcut key SL, and I could just split it. Now just split it right there. Hit the escape key twice to get out of the split command. Select this, and then I can move it and specify the distance. Okay, so that's another really useful useful command. Okay, and that's it. That's all I'm going to cover. Actually, I take that back. Let's talk about offset. That's also another really useful command, although I have found that offset is much more common and useful in AutoCAD than it is in Revit, but it's still used a lot in Revit. So what an offset does, actually, let's go ahead and, actually, no, we'll go ahead. What the offset tool command does is it'll offset an object. So let's say we wanted to take this, this wall right here and offset it 5 feet. So we obviously, just like the rotate tool, we have the copy option here. So let's go ahead and leave that on. But over here, it's asking me what is the offset distance. So I said, let's move this 5 feet. Let's offset this 5 feet. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is, if I place my cursor over the wall, you'll notice there's that blue line down at the bottom, right? And as I move my cursor over to the other side of the wall, that blue line switches and moves to the other side. And what's happening is that Revit is saying, well, where do you want to offset? Do you want to offset this wall 5 feet up, or do we want to offset it 5 feet down? So depending on where you click, right, and where your cursor is in relationship to this wall, whether it's on the bottom side or the top side, Revit will offset the wall in that direction. Okay, so it's very important that when you specify the dimension, you pay close attention to the cursor and that blue line. Okay, so we want to offset this down. So I'll move the cursor down and then I'll click. And it just offsetted this wall 5 feet. Let me do this one more time. Let's change this down to 7 feet. But this time, let's take copy off. So we'll go ahead and it's going to be the same exact thing. We're going to move the cursor down. Yeah, I see the blue line at the bottom. I'll click. And now it moved it 7 feet down. Okay. So that's the other really useful tool is the offset tool. Now we could also use the offset tool when we're actually building a wall. So I'm going to go to the architecture tab, click on the wall. Doesn't really matter right now. The interior 4 3/4, let's stick with that. Location line finish face interior. And now we're going to, oops, I take this back. Let's go wall. I'm sorry, I'm getting these two confused. I'm getting you guys confused. We also have, when we build the wall, we have the offset command here, okay? This offset command is to offset objects that are already existing. But if we want to start off by offsetting from the very beginning, that's an option that we have here in the options command. So let's go ahead and offset again 5 feet. And what I'm going to do is let's click on, let's say we want offset 5 feet from the core face. Okay, so not from the finish face, from the core face. So now I'll go ahead and click here. I'll start my wall there. Okay, and I'll move my cursor this way. Right, and you could begin to see my wall being created on right above me. Now the same thing, actually no, I take that back. So it's coming up 5 feet on this side. Okay, so then I would go ahead and just finish there. If I wanted to, you know, I could go 5 feet just like that. Not that I want to, but we could do that. Now, notice what happened here. Let me just stop here. Is that we had that chain command. Okay? Remember that the chain command continues the wall. So it'll automatically join all of your corners. So since we had chain turned on, we had a 5 foot offset, it drew a wall that was 5 feet apart or 5 feet away from here. But when I turned that corner and I came down, it continued 5 feet from this point down. And when I finished the wall, it joined the corners together. Okay, so that's another option. You want to get comfortable with these commands. You want to get really good with them. And most importantly, you want to get creative with them. Okay, so oftentimes as we're modeling, it's really just a matter of like, well, what's the fastest way I can model this? I could take kind of a long way and do everything, you know, one wall at a time. Or maybe I could find some shortcuts with using the trim tool, maybe using the align tool, maybe using the offset tool. Maybe there's similar objects here that I can just mass copy. So you want to use these commands creatively, okay? No one is going to tell you how to use them. You just have to begin to feel comfortable with these commands by practicing and using them. And then be creative as you're modeling. That's the trick, okay? Now, the one last thing that we are going to cover, that I wanted to cover, is going to be, it's going to be the temporary dimensions. So let me go ahead and do a cross window here, delete this. Before we cover temporary dimensions, we have to change a setting for temporary dimensions, okay? So we're gonna go up to manage. Then we're gonna go down to additional settings. And under annotations, we have this pull out. On my side, it's going to come out over here on this side. You're going to select temporary dimensions. Oh, there's my warning sign. This is another throwaway file, so I'm not going to save it. Unless you wanted to save yours, you can. I'm just going to hit cancel. Okay, so I'll talk about temporary dimensions in a minute. Right now, what I want you to do is just set it to, let's go with faces. and doors and windows to openings. Sometimes I toggle between faces and faces of core. Okay, you know what? Let's leave it at this. Before I actually kind of go back, let's come back to this. I want you to actually have an understanding of what temporary dimensions is before I discuss this option and why we kind of toggle back and forth. Okay, so let's create, let's just create an odd shaped building. Just go ahead and click around and create yourself a little Tetris piece. Okay, and close it off. Temporary dimensions are just that. They're dimensions that are temporary, and they help us to understand the distance between certain objects. So when I click on this wall, we get these blue dimensions. And these blue dimensions are telling me that, hey, you're 24 feet away from this wall, and you're 23 7/4 away from this wall. Okay. And this is going to pop up all the time as you go around and you click dimensions. Okay. Now, what we just did in those settings, right, was we told Revit, what do we want to dimension to, right? Where do we want these temporary dimensions to dimension from? So right now it's set to faces. So when I click here, if I zoom in, you'll notice that this blue line, if I follow it along, is dimensioning from this face to this face. Okay. Now, what Revit decides to dimension to is sometimes arbitrary, but most of the time it's to the nearest wall from the wall that you selected. But let's say I don't want that dimension. I want it here. Well, then that's when these little grip points come in. You'll notice that every temporary dimension has 4 sets. Typically, it has 4 sets of grip points. This one right now only has 3. It has the 2 here that we can change. Actually, no, I take that back. The other ones are related to the wall. So the temporary dimension has 2 grip points, and we can change or we can move these temporary dimensions by selecting the grip point and moving them down. So for example, I could click and drag to this wall. I can click and drag to this wall, and it's giving me this dimension here. You want to be very careful, though, that as you're moving this, that you're not just kind of haphazardly moving these temporary grip points. Okay. In other words, if I'm going to move it, let's click and drag. Now, this is also gets a little tricky because I still have the cursor on my, I still have the cursor pressed down, and I have to zoom out, then zoom kind of back in. Okay. And what I'm saying is you want to make sure that you don't accidentally say dimension to the center of the wall or accidentally select the other side of the wall, the other face of the wall. So you want to just make sure that you really zoom in and you really make sure that you are selecting the side of the wall that you want. Okay. Now, the other part that gets confusing for people is that I drew this wall 24 feet, right? And I only know that just because I saw it right now. So I drew this wall at, let's say it's 24 feet. Well, let's say I want to change this to 20 feet, okay? The common mistake is that people will want to select this wall. And they say, well, wait a minute, the temporary dimension is not here for this wall. I want to change this wall down to 20 feet. The part that gets a little confusing is that when you move a wall, when you want to adjust the length of this wall, we have to tell Revit which side of the wall do you want to adjust. Okay, so in other words, if I took this wall and then just manually made it 20 feet, right, you'll notice that it's no longer connected here. So the next step would be, well, now I have to move this wall over so that it connects. If we undo that, and we did the same over here, the same thing would happen, right? We would end up with a gap, and then would have to move this over. So instead of selecting this and trying to change this to 20 feet, what we have to do is say, hey, I want this wall to move with my change to 20 feet. Okay. So if we want to adjust the length of this wall, we don't actually click on the wall. What we need to do is click on the wall that we want to move in order to make this wall the length that it needs to be. So maybe it's this wall here, okay? And the temporary dimensions does move. So we have to kind of zoom out if you don't see it and say, you know what, this now really needs to be 25 feet. Okay, so the same thing goes over here. If I want to move this wall, well, the question is, does this wall want to come up, or does this wall want to come down in order to make this, let's say 15 feet? So I could bring this, select this, and say, you know what, let's go 15 feet. Okay. Now, before we do that though, let me undo this. Before we do that, just make sure that your temporary dimension is set correct. Because sometimes, as you're moving quickly and as you're moving around, you sometimes forget, and the temporary dimension will sometimes pop up on the other side here. Okay, and then you'd go in and say, okay, 15 feet, great, I'm on to the next one. And you'll go around and you build out the model, and then when you go back to dimension, you dimension to the inside where that's where you originally wanted it to be, and now you're short. And you're trying to figure out, well, I know I put that to 15 feet. Why is it not set to 15 feet? Okay. So that's the trick with the temporary dimensions. So again, if we wanted to move this in, we would select it. Maybe we want this to be from the other side. So set your grip points correct first, and then move this to the correct distance. Okay. Now, really quickly, just to go back to annotations, temporary dimensions. I stopped here, right? When I said, well, do I want faces or faces of core? Right now we were set to faces, but this decision comes down to what is it that you're going to be drawing? Are you drawing from an existing floor plan? And if you have existing dimensions, where are those dimensions being taken from? So if you have a floor plan, take a look at the dimensions. Are the dimensions from the core face to the core face? Or is it from drywall to drywall, or finish face to finish face? That's going to make your determination to know, okay, all my temporary dimensions really should be set to faces. Or maybe they should be set to faces of core, right? You're going to have to make that determination. If you're not working off of a floor plan and you're going to start off from scratch, then you have to ask yourself, hey, when I'm done with this, are my dimensions going to be set to face, or are they going to be set from core to core? Okay. And whatever you're going to be dimensioning to, that's what you're going to want to set here. Okay. So hopefully that's it. Not hopefully, that's it what we're covering right now for these wall commands and these temporary dimensions. I know it's a lot to cover before we could even actually get started on building a floor plan, but this is all really critical information, and hopefully you kind of have a general understanding of it, and hopefully it's now going to make much more sense as we begin to move forward and start with our first floor plan. Okay, good luck, everyone.